Good, I appreciate that. Well, thank you very much, Bryce, and thank all of you for the opportunity to be here again at your conference. And my hat's off to the leadership of putting together such a good conference. I've told several people this is growing into be one of the premier dairy industry meetings in the country, so my hat's off to you. And again, thanks for inviting me back. And my goal today is try to make it worth your while to sit here close to 5 o'clock and listen to what I have to say. So again, I appreciate the opportunity. I'm going to talk with you about three things, and all are going to be giving you a southeast perspective. And my goal is to show you how it is and looking ahead far as impacting your milk price. I'm going to talk about the federal milk marketing order changes. You might not want to hear more about that, but it's very, very important. It's made a big difference on your milk check, and it's going to continue making a big difference for several years to come. And let me tell you right up front, when I talk about the federal milk marketing order changes, I'm going to be giving you a little different perspective, probably from what you've read or heard in the past. Then talk about milk supply and demand, and then give you my price forecast here for this coming year. Starting out with the federal milk marketing order changes. The biggest one for the Southeast, it increased Class I differentials. That was the biggie. It increased Class I differentials. And if you look here on the slide, I've got two tables. And it's very important for you to understand the difference in these two tables, because it's the bottom one that's impacting your milk check. If you look at the top, I've got it divided into three federal milk marketing orders that cover the Southeast: Appalachian, Florida, and the Southeast. The Milk Market Administrator every month announces a Class I price at the base zone. Every federal milk marketing order has a base zone. And if you start with the Appalachian, that base zone is Charlotte. The old differential there before the change was $3.40. The new one is $5.60. It went up to $2.20. Florida, base zone is Tampa or Central Florida. It went up $1.40. And Atlanta, here where we are here in Georgia, base zone is Atlanta there. It went up $2 in the Southeast order. But those are the announcements. That's not what goes in your milk check. Come down here to the bottom, what I call effective, or another way you can put it is the weighted average. And let me explain what I mean, why in the Southeast order the effective is $1.53, not $2. $2 is only paid by plants in that Atlanta area. You've got a lot of milk in the Southeast that goes west. You've got milk in the Southeast that goes all the way to Springfield, Missouri. That Class I differential in Springfield, Missouri is over $2 a hundredweight lower than what it is in Atlanta. The one up in Nashville, Tennessee is over $1. So you weight all those together, or you pool all those values together when you calculate your milk check. And so it might be announced the differential went up $2 in Southeast order, but the effective since June has only been $1.53. That's what's going in your milk check. The same way in the Appalachian order. The base zone is Charlotte. All the other milk plants except one in that Appalachian order are lower than that. So the effective differential is $1.82. The only exception is Florida. The effective is $6.95 versus $6.80. That's because of Miami being in a higher zone, more milk processed down there. So once you look at the bottom ones, the effective ones, that's the one impacting your milk check, not the ones that you see announced up there. And that's very important to keep in mind. The other big thing about the differentials going up, you see I'm calling this decoupling of the Class I price. Some of you might remember one of your former presidents, Tom Thompson. And I think he was president for several years. Tom and I worked together on several things on dairy policy 15, 20 years ago. And one of the big things about Tom, he kept wanting to decouple the Class 1 price. Well, we're still not there on decoupling the Class 1 price, but by differentials going up, we're having a lot more of your Class 1 price, especially in the Southeast order, being fixed. It's not going to be fluctuating based upon dairy commodity prices. In fact, the way I like to tell a lot of people, the only thing that's going to change it is an act of Congress or another federal order hearings. And let me show you what the numbers are. Again, I just took Atlanta. The Class 1 mover was $16.35. If we actually put it on the actual fat content of Class 1 milk, it was $2.66 for this running. So it'd been about $15.10 would have been the Class 1 mover. We add the differential to it. The other assessments, you might not be getting those directly, but they are paid to your handler. And so the total price is $22. When you look at all the assessments there, the fixed price is running over 30% now. So the point I want to make, at more now of your Class 1 price is fixed. It's not going to be subject to changes in your commodity price. It's there. And again, we go further south, it's going to be a higher percent. We go a little further north and west, it's going to be a lower. But that was a big change impacting, especially this part of the world, getting more of the price fixed in there. The other big thing on federal order changes was the higher of. That was a big one. If we go back a few past years when that change was made, it cost you as dairy farmers, especially in this market, a lot of money. We're talking about millions. So that was a big change. But going forward, we just don't know. So if we look at it from June up through January, you can see it's been up and down, up and down. We started out, actually the higher of lowered your price. But we get to December, and you're going to see more results of that here later. Big jump, $1.38. The average has been about 17 cents. Well, what about going forward? Well, I just don't know. It's going to be simple arithmetic. If that spread between the Class 3 and Class 4 skim price is greater than $1.48, the higher of will be better. If it's lower, the average of will be better. But having said that, I'm convinced that long term, the higher of is better. Because the average of, to me, when that thing was developed, is just about like pulling a rabbit out of a hat. It was not based on sound economics. The higher of is based on sound economics. But one thing we will see a little bit more of the higher of, and to me it's not all bad, there will be more variation. In fact, during this 7-month period, the variation's been about double being on the higher of. But again, that's where we are so far. Now, what about the other changes impact on the Southeast? The lower make allowances, that was a biggie. You see at the top of the list I have up there is butterfat. The federal order changes lowered the butterfat price 6 3/4 cents per pound. And that was the same whether you're milking cows in Okeechobee, Florida, or Spokane, Washington. That was consistent all over the lower in the butterfat price. The other changes, what the make allowance did on the Class 2 and 3, 4, on the Southeast orders, where the milk is priced on skim butterfat, through June and November, you can see how much it lowered it. 64 cents, 70 cents, and 64 cents. Class 2 and 4 going to always be just within a penny of each other. So it lowered that through June through November. In the multiple component pricing markets, where Class 2, 3, and 4 are sold based upon components, it had no impact on them as far as the skim price. It did change their component prices. But if you come to the middle slide here, this one had a big impact on the Southeast, the skim fat orders. That was the higher skim factors. And let me just say up front, probably of all the 5 proposals presented to that hearing, this was the one that most people did not understand. and still a lot of people don't understand. What this increase in the skim milk factors are is that in skim fat markets like this, we have to take the component prices and convert them to skim on a per hundredweight. So you have to multiply them by a factor. For example, in getting class 3 skim, the old factor was 3.1 because as components have gone up, as Corey explained, that factor needed to go up. So now we multiply by 3.3. Whey went up to 6.0. So just simple arithmetic, multiplying by a higher factor adds money to that price. So you can see but the higher skim factors did not go into December. In fact, you're not going to see those until your blend price check comes out here, should be coming out, or you should have already seen your got your December check. So it offset some of the lower skim prices. And again, that will stay in place going forward. The other two there, barrel cheese. Well, USDA does not publish a barrel price anymore, so we don't know for sure. Chicago Mercantile Exchange still publishes a barrel price. Based upon that, and then in the old formula, you added 3 cents a pound to that. If based upon that, so far, the barrel cheese eliminator has lowered the price. But again, we just don't know for sure. The other one that was added was the adjuster for extended shelf life milk. And again, that's been a big variation so far since June. But here in the Southeast, it's just non-significant. It just haven't had any impact on your price. Now, what's the bottom line? What has it done to your blend price since June? What is the bottom line? Took the 3 orders, and this is my calculations, actually taking the total revenue that comes from the federal order pool, which the market administrator does every month, divided by how many pounds of milk that you have in the pool, and then come up with your blend price. Well, for the 3 orders, as you can see, the first couple of months, negative numbers. Then we started getting some positive numbers late summer, early fall. And then in your December check was the biggest increase. Appalachian up $1.92, Florida up $1.82, the Southeast up $1.69. Why the bigger increase in December? One, higher milk composition factors went in place, and you got a lot more benefit from the higher of, all right? If we add it up, and again, this was a weighted average since June, it's increased the blend price or federal order pool value 77 cents in the Appalachian order, 35 cents in Florida, 36 cents in the Southeast. So far, it's been a positive impact on your milk price. What about going forward? Well, again, a lot of it's going to depend upon that higher of, because it makes a big part of it. But going forward, just looking at projections, it should be a positive impact, especially here for the Southeast, being in a high Class 1 market. Now, what's the bottom line for all the federal order changes? What's the bottom line? That hearing went on for days and days and days. Millions of dollars were spent in lawyer fees. The thing just kept going on. But when I sum it all up, those federal order changes did 2 things. Number 1, increased Class 1 differentials throughout the country. Only went up 25 cents in Arizona, but Appalachian-based zone went up the highest at $2.20. If you take all those together, get a weighted average of what I call the effective, $1.24 a hundredweight. Now, some people are going to say, well, it increased the Class 1 price. Not necessarily, because you got orders of the country where the differential didn't go up as much, might not get, some months didn't get benefit of the higher of, Class 1 price might not have went up. But again, overall, Class 1 differential went up. The Southeast had the greatest benefit from it. But what about multi-component pricing markets, which is about 95% of all federal order milk? Again, that's where they pay for class 2, 3, and 4 based upon components. That's the manufactured milk. Based on average components through June or December, it lowered the class 3 and 4 price by 93 cents a hundredweight, and class 2 and 4 prices by 93 cents a hundredweight, and it lowered the class 3 or cheese price by $1.01 a hundredweight. Now, I know there's no cheese manufacturing here, and you'll see later we're almost all class 1. Why would I put those numbers up there? Well, Corey showed you a map of all the expansion going on, dairy expansion, and the bulk of that, again, is manufacturing a lot of cheese. And if you stop and think about it, again, these plants are not required to participate in the order, but yet the order prices set the base of what they're measured by. And so you can see by lowering the milk price this much, it does open up quite a bit of additional dollars to help pay for that expansion. If you take a cheese plant taking in 10 million pounds of milk a day, which is not uncommon, it lowers their federal order milk price if they pay the federal order minimum by about $100,000 a day. And that's a pretty significant amount of money. Okay, let's move on now to the market here. Looking at your market. The good news here is that your class 1% continues to increase. I like to put all 3 orders combined because so much milk moves between the orders. And so if you just look over since 2021, 71.9% class 1, last year 74.5%. So the class 1% is moving up, which is good. The more milk you have in class 1 price higher, the higher your blend price. And again, that still runs way about 3 times more than what the national average is. This year about going to be a little less than 27%. But if you go up on the right, you can see the Appalachian went up some, went to 72.3. Florida continues to go down. Southeast went down just a little bit. But what you're going to see over time is that the class 1 utilization in the Florida order and the Southeast order are going to get closer and closer. And you'll see that later when it comes to the blend price. So again, class 1 utilization continue to go up. All right, what about your market? What about your class 1 milk? And I use class 1 producer milk here because that is what you are paid for. Those numbers are accurate. The market administrator, he audits them down to the second decimal place. So those numbers are solid. And what I've done, just to make it simpler, I just put it on a load basis. And I use 50,000 pounds of a tanker load. I know the loads are getting bigger now, but I just use 50,000 pounds. Last year, if you look under the total, 451 loads of class 1 producer milk a day. I hoped after last year that decline might have settled off, got a little flatter, but unfortunately it didn't. Dropped 7 loads a day from last year, and you can see the decline has been 34 loads a day just since 2021. And again, look at the individual orders last year. Appalachian down a load, well, and you can see it across there. But hopefully this thing will finally settle out because that is your market. And unfortunately, so far that market keeps on declining. But I've added something here at the bottom that's something we don't see, we don't talk about. The class 2 used to produce. What do I mean by class 2 used to produce? These are the regulated milk plants in the 3 Southeast orders. These are plants that are bottling milk, putting out a packaged milk, but they're also making class 2 products, cottage cheese, yogurt, ice cream. That has gradually been going up. Last year, all 3 orders combined was 50 loads a day. Again, not the 451, but 50 loaves of milk is not insignificant. And last year, that went up 3 loads a day. Over time, it's been gradually going up. I know it's class 2. It's not class 1, big difference in price, but yet class 2 is 70 cents a hundredweight better than class 4. So again, class 2 market been increasing here, and a lot of it could be because, as the previous speakers have talked about, increased demand for protein, yogurt, and cottage cheese, and so forth. Okay, well, let's look at the whole market together. And I call this in versus total. And went back to 2020. 2025, it's an estimate, but that number is not going to be very far off because it was one order. I didn't have December data, but I had it for the other 2 orders. And under the second column where it says plants and the 3 orders, that'd be 8.12 billion pounds in 2025. What does that mean? That is all the regulated plants located in these 3 southeastern federal orders. That was the pounds of milk that they received and put in a bottle for fluid or drinking purposes. Again, that's the market administrator audited number, 8.12 billion pounds. And unfortunately, that was down 2.1% from the previous year, and we're down, unfortunately, about 1 billion pounds from what we were back in 2020. That is fluid milk put out by plants in these orders. Well, what about total sales? Well, the market administrator also tracks all of the fluid milk sold in the 3 southeast orders, even if it comes from plants outside the 3 orders. So that's total fluid sales. Last year, 9.17 billion pounds, down 1.7%. So in other words, 9.17 billion pounds of milk sold in the 3 southeast federal orders fluid milk last year. A little over 1 billion pounds of that was processed and packaged outside the 3 orders. And that number stayed fairly steady for several years now. Last year was about 88.6%. The point I want to make here is we're going to see later, or I'll go ahead and point it out now. And you've heard me say this for several years. The greatest challenge or roadblock for the dairy industry to grow in the Southeast is to have markets. I mean, you can produce more milk if you got the markets. That's the limiting factor. Now, you can find the markets, but you got to truck that milk some distance. But that's the biggest challenge I see facing the Southeast. So if there's another 1 billion pounds of milk being processed outside and brought in, maybe that's an opportunity. Maybe some of it couldn't be. But again, to me, to grow the Southeast dairy industry, these numbers have got to be reversed. We've got to have a growing market. All right. What about milk supply here in the Southeast? All right. My estimate for 2025, I guess I'm a little optimistic, Everett. I'm showing it's going to be 7.9 billion. We won't know for another month or so, up a little bit from the previous year. But you can see I went back to 2010. We dropped about 1 billion pounds. If I went back to the year 2000, it was over 12 billion pounds of milk. And I just put up the 2 states here, Florida and Georgia. And I guess I want to brag on you people here in Georgia just a little bit. If we go back to 2010, you only had 1.4 billion pounds of milk. This year, I'm looking at you going to be 2.8 billion pounds of milk. Since 2010, over 15 years, you've increased your production about 50%. And where's Larry Guthrie? Larry, where are you at? I talked to you early. Larry, I thought is Larry still here? Okay, Larry was sitting there. I first met Larry back in 1977. So that was a few years ago. Probably some of you people weren't around back in 1977. But I remember when I first met Larry Guthrie, Larry was so pro on Georgia milk production. He just kept saying, well, Georgia is just a great place to produce milk. If the opportunity is there, it can grow. Well, I was going to tell Larry, it took a little while coming, but you've grown your milk production. In fact, your milk production in Georgia has increased the most of any state east of the Mississippi. Has increased the most, any state east of Mississippi. And there's only 5 other states that have increased their production more since 2010. That's Kansas, Texas, Wyoming, Colorado, and South Dakota. So you've done a good job of producing milk. And then I added Florida here. It's been back and forth between last 2-3 years who's produced the milk more, Georgia or Florida. And again, I'm not trying to put out any other states in the Southeast, but Florida and Georgia's share just keeps growing, up to 52%. I think in 5 years, probably Florida and Georgia's share is going to be up over 60% of the milk in the Southeast. All right, what about my projections for next year? I know Corey talked about cow numbers growing and so forth. I don't want to repeat anything that he said, but yet I need to put these numbers up there to give you some basis for my price projections for next year. If we look at cow numbers, when you average them out for all year, we're going to end up somewhere, the published number average for the year is going to be somewhere about 9.5 million cows, up 158,000 head. Maybe I'm too optimistic on this, but I only showing in growth next year about 55,000 head. When you see my milk prices, those milk prices have got to do some impacting. We look at milk production, up 2.24% this year. And like Corey, I like to look at the components. And this year, we finally got when the pools were all settled for December, we got averages for 2025, 4.29 fat, 3.34 protein. You do the calculations, this year we're going to come up producing a little over 31 billion pounds of milk solids. 31 billion pounds of milk solids. Milk solids up about 3.4%. Now, I want you to remember that number, if you can, till I get to the next slide. What about next year? Well, just based upon past history, I'm looking about next year, fat tests going up, protein tests going up as well. And for how many years have we talked about having I know at least when I was growing up on the farm milking cows, boy, anytime you could get a cow, read about a cow that producing 1,000 pounds fat, well, that was something else. Well, I'm predicting next year, as a country as a whole, we're going to be 10 billion pounds of fat. And you see, and then total solids up about 2% next year. But Corey, if you don't mind, I'm going to add something on about the components here, maybe make you feel a little bit since you're a Holstein guy, especially coming from a Jersey guy here. But first of all, here on the components here, I don't think we're doing enough to point out how that's made the industry more efficient, that growth in components. I know Corey had a table chart of it, but just over the last few years, the cheddar cheese yield has increased over a pound a hundredweight. Now, that might not sound a lot, but let's go back to my cheese plant that's taking in 10 million pounds of milk a day. And again, that's not uncommon. And before, they were putting out about 1 million pounds of cheese a day. Well, if they still want to put out 1 million pounds of cheese today, because those components have gone up, that means they can take in 20 less tanker loads of milk a day. That is efficiency. I know y'all put a pile of money in various groups about trying to get the industry more efficient. but I don't know anything that's made the industry more efficient than that. Now, what about the fluid industry? Well, I know I'm talking about cheese, but one thing we're overlooking about these components going up, what we've done, how we've helped fluid milk. You know, people drink milk for nutrition. Because those component levels have gone up, and you're using the same genetics that people do all over the country, so your component levels have gone up too. And that glass of milk for consumers, we're giving them more protein per serving. More protein per serving. And that's significant. More nutrition in the same gallon of milk. Plus, we all know that the solids in milk give milk flavor. So by the components going up, we're making that milk taste better as well. Now, we're going to, Mike, been years since I've seen you, but good to see you. You've got one that you're going to hear tomorrow from what I consider one of the best nutritionists in the world. And Mike, I don't know if you're going to agree with what I'm getting to say, but a lot of this increase in components, we're feeding cows better. Just feeding cow better. So I don't know where it's going to stop, plus the genomics and so forth and all that. But again, an efficiency story there. All right, well, let's get into one more, need to look at nationwide demand before we get into milk price forecast. Again, looking at milk production based upon on total solids, these are USDA economic research statistics. The last one just come out here last week. We got it through October. And they look at demand based upon skim solids and fat solids. And that's the number I like to track. And it supports what previous speakers have talked about. If we go up to skim solids, we've seen on domestic skim solids have gone up 3.7%. Nice increase. People eating more cottage cheese, eating more yogurt, more protein products. Export of skim solids went down. We know that because last year we're not exporting near the amount of milk powder that we did. Total skim up about 2.4%. But one important number to look at is inventory. Our inventories for skim solids are not building. That's good news. If we want to have a price recovery, we're better off not to have any extra inventory, because if we have extra inventory like we did many years ago with non-fat milk powder, it takes a while to get that off before milk prices can recover. So the inventory is good. What about fat? Domestic fat went up. The big one, export, up almost 40%. But unfortunately on exports, the reason we exported so much butter out of the country last year, the price was very competitive compared to the world price. And I'm afraid that won't always hold. So total fat up 3.4. Again, no issues with inventory. And then you see my number. So our total solids so far through October, we're up 2.7%. And what did I show you on milk production? So our production on total solids have actually gone up a little bit more than what we've done so far on demand. And the number I have in parentheses, if you just do the arithmetic, look like, this year we're going to export about 16% of milk solids, which is down from some previous years. But again, that's where we are in demand. And in normal times, having a demand increase of 2.7% is not bad at all. Okay, what about milk prices? All right. In determining milk prices, we have to know the price of 4 dairy commodities: cheese, butter, non-fat dry milk, and dry whey. And I've used USDA projections with this. The last ones came out on January the 12th. We start with butter. Next year on butter, down about 61 cents a pound. Now, to put that in perspective, we've got to remember every penny change in the price of butter changes your butterfat price 1.2 cents. All right? Cheese, down about 20 cents. So we got to remember with cheese, every penny change in cheese lowers the milk price about 10 cents a pound. Non-fat dry milk only down about 3. Penny change in non-fat dry milk changes 9 cents. The good news is on dry whey. Wasn't that many years ago, dry whey is back in the 25, 30 cent range. Gone up this year 11 cents, next year about 7. And every penny a pound change in dry whey changes your milk price 6 cents a pound. But we come down here on current USDA projections. You can see next year showing class 3 down $1.66, class 4 down $2.93, all milk price down $2.90. That's some pretty tough numbers right there. But I want to go back to the previous two speakers where you talked about beef on dairy and talk about bull calves. Well, just doing what I call feed tag arithmetic, you got a lot of farmers producing milk. That class 3 price is $16.35 a hundredweight. But if you can keep on selling calves once they get dry for $1,000, you just do the math. If she's a 25,000 pound cow, that's about $4 a hundredweight. So that could extend the low milk prices. We don't know. But you can't help but think if milk price is this low, it's got to have some impact. And again, the all milk price there, that's at test. That's at test, and that's the all milk price that's used in the dairy margin program. And just based upon current feed prices and that all milk price, there's going to be payments next year. All right, but you're interested in your milk check. All right, if we start out, and again, these are at 3.5, and you notice I got the term up there, SUP. That's statistical uniform price. Again, I talked to you earlier about those base zone areas. So that's the market administrator's price at 3.5 fat at that base zone. And again, you could be at a number plus or minus that, but the change is going to be the same, all right? So had to standardize it. So if you look last year, Appalachian orders down 70 cents, Florida down $1.18, the Southeast down 82. And for some people, Everett is probably keeping track record of how well I do every year. I missed it last year. I plumb missed it. Last year at this time, I had prices going up about $1 a hundredweight. So I'll leave it up to you if you want to listen to me this year or not. But I just missed it. I just didn't see cow numbers and milk production growing that much. But you see Florida dropped more than the other two. Why did Florida drop more? Didn't get the increase in the class 1 differential. The other two orders did. Also, class 1 utilization or sales were down more there. So what about, and then I know a lot of people still follow the butterfat differential. I know you're paid on a per pound butterfat basis, but I put it on a butterfat differential. You see last year about 24 cents. If I had 2024 up there, if you remember, it was over 30 cents a point. Come down this year, and I hope nobody's going to throw something out at me, but my price is a little bit better than what USDA is saying. I'm showing the Appalachian down about $2 or $1.95, $1.90 on the Southeast, and $2.22 on the Florida order. And you can see butterfat got on the differential basis down to 16.5 cents. I wish I could give you better news than that. And again, I'm hope next year at this time, when you look at the numbers, I'd hope I'd be wrong, and I'd be wrong the other way, where they'd be up. But that's based upon what I see now. Now, one more slide. Let me tell you the reason I'm doing this slide. My mother told me many, many years ago, she says, Calvin, if you can't say something good about something, don't say nothing at all. Well, I don't want my mama to be rolling over in the grave giving you those kind of milk prices. So I put this table up here. And so this is on the Southeast order. So at least I can say I've got the 3.5 price, blend price at $20.68. At least it's above $20 a hundredweight. And because we go back just a few years ago, we were below 20. So the good news is I'm projecting it to stay above $20 a hundredweight. All right. Again, I want to point out all my data sources. As Corey said, USDA just supplies such a wealth of information out there, and this is where all my data comes from, market administrators, NAS, ERS. So just want to acknowledge all my data sources. And again, just thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I don't know if we got time for any questions.
We do have time for questions.
Okay.
Do we have any questions for Calvin?
Oh, I've got 4 minutes, don't I? Didn't see that. Oh, is that over or under?
No, it's counting down.
Okay, all right. Oh, that's right, okay.
Do we have any questions for Calvin?
Everybody wants to go, don't they?
This may not be an easy question to ask, but I do have one question. You mentioned about, being off on the projections because the cow numbers ended up being so different from those reports, and the production increase was drastically different from what was projected.
Yeah.
In your experience doing this, how often does that happen?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question because I did have it in my notes, but I was watching my time. I didn't mention that. If you go back to the cattle reports, and if you look back about, USDA puts out a report, put out one last January, they have the heifer numbers or the heifers expected the calf. If you use that, we shouldn't have this many cows. And what my opinion is, and again, Corey, you'd know better than I would or so forth, but I just don't think USDA is getting a good count today on the heifer replacements. And one of the reasons I don't think they're getting a good count is that how many of you are shipping your calves out somewhere else to be raised? They're not staying on the farm. I mean, that's happened a lot. So I think we're losing count. And plus, you would not be shipping them out to be raised unless they were doing a real good job at it and keeping more of them alive, growing them out, and so forth. So I just don't know on that heifer number, how good a count we're getting. I mean, that's just, I don't have any data to back that up, but that's just my opinion. And again, like we talked about, day-old calves bringing what they are, I think you look twice about whether you're going to cull a cow or not. You might have a cow that's below herd average, but if she's solid, breeds back every time, gives you a live calf, you're probably going to keep her. These prices.